Now, when I first coined CPUSA 2036, I want to give some context to that, right? Because I am going to take credit for this. I'm not going to take credit for it in the sense that I coined dark MAGA, but this aesthetic, I'm taking credit for it, okay? So in 2021, I was doing a live stream with me and the showrunners and also this guy named Cockydoody. You don't know who he is. And we were basically I was discussing a vision that I had about why I think the CPUSA is worth reclaiming. And my idea was that, we actually didn't know this, but we didn't know what future was for America. We just kind of had a very multipolar orientation. We understood a new significance of China and Russia. But the question of America was still like, America is the great Satan in a sense, right? It represents the culmination of modernity and the Enlightenment to the point of self-consuming madness. So for me, I came to this conclusion that the CPUSA 2036 basically refers to a kind of like chickens coming home to roost for America. Because America, this is what the neo-reactionary writer Moldbug said, and he's more or less kind of correct. Communism is as American as apple pie. But he's saying it from an anti-communist perspective. Communism came from America. The kind of destructive negation embodied by communism of this revolutionary overthrow of old orders and an ancient regime, this universal abstract kind of state planning, all of that has its origins in America. That's actually what America is, okay? So for me, the Communist Party, the reason communism never really took root in America is because America was already communist from day one. It always was, right? In a sense. It's just that America is a jealous God that does not tolerate other communists in its midst, right? The problem America had with the Soviet Union and China wasn't that they were communists, it's that they weren't America, right? So yeah, it's a really big red pill, I guess. But my idea for the Communist Party 2036 as the future of America is that by bringing communism to America, America will confront its own image. It will confront its own reflection, its own mirror image. And this confrontation will produce something. I don't know what it's going to produce, but it will produce something historically novel that is the destiny of America. The chickens must come home to roost. The idea basically is that from some kind of alchemical combination, American communism will awaken an American civilization. Because the whole idea was basically this, guys. Let me sum it up for you like this. Russia and China have cultures and civilizations. And communism was just a layer on top of that. America doesn't have a civilization. All we have is technology, formal, abstract, universal statehood. So it's like we just have this kind of reflexive communism, but we don't have like the fundamental substantive social bonds that link a people together. We don't have unwritten, unconscious prohibitions, and we don't have a patriarchy, if you will, right? Not in a feminist sense of the word patriarchy, but like in the sense of like a Freudian sense of a patriarchy. We don't have that in America, right? So for me, the kind of science fiction vision of CPUSA 2036 and a communist civil war in America was about this confrontation between America and itself in the form of communism that will somehow, through a kind of negation of negation, produce or give breathing room to the final expression of some kind of social substance, some kind of civilization, some kind of tradition, some kind of thing that can give rise to a real civil society. So that was my idea. And to me, I literally was describing this in the stream for CPUSA 2036 that no one really ever fully understood the aesthetic. For me, CPUSA 2036 was not like a Gothic or Baroque or necessarily demonic aesthetic, but it was dark, glowing red. It's literally what I called it. I called it dark, glowing red aesthetic. And I specifically, where I got this vision from was I was driving on the highway during the winter when it was snowy out, and it was very foggy when I was driving on the highway. And I was looking at the red bumper lights of the cars in front of me, and that's pretty much where I got the aesthetic from. Like, to me, that whole scene, that kind of like scenery, that to me, that was the aesthetic of American communism for 2036, for the future. It's like this combination of dark, glowing red in the fog, right? Red being a communist color, right? So it's hard explaining this to you guys because I told you, primarily I'm an artist before anything, right? You know, I've thought about so much, like, what is America? And how can America be something that's united or whatever? Not united, but like, what could be a commons in America? Because there's almost nothing that unites Americans. And the reason I mentioned the infrastructure thing is also because it's a type of way in which the global supply chains, not only of goods, but also of culture and the people of the world, basically, America will be this kind of infrastructural nomadic land where this is like where I don't know, to be the infrastructural way of kind of almost connecting the world together. But there's also a dark side to that too, where it's also like when I mentioned that nomadicism, because America is this kind of flat like landscape, basically. You know what I'm saying? This grid. Is that I have this like kind of vision of the future that's not, I don't take it literally, but it's kind of like a fantasy where it's like we're entering a kind of age of socialistic nomadicism where, as you mentioned, there's all sorts of kinds of groups that are converging together in this autonomous kind of way. And I feel like it's kind of this new warlordism that's going to emerge where America is going to just purely stand for this common flat infrastructure, and us being Americans it's just going to mean like a type of warlord type of civil war where everyone's vying for control over the infrastructure, over the means of, I don't know, does what I say make sense, or it's kind of schizo?
I think it makes sense because part of what I think you're describing is this: when you think about like what's the political fight right now, and I'm just looking at fucking Twitter because I haven't spoken to people I don't know in real life in a long fucking time. It's depressing. But it's like people are fighting over the big tech companies. They're fighting over Amazon, which is not just tech in the sense of like, you know, a big website, but also the warehouses, distribution, the highways, the fact of taking over postal services, the fact that Amazon is supplying supplies to military bases and the government buildings and shit like that. We're talking about like how does politics intersect with like infrastructure, with the day-to-day running, with the logistics of a country, and where it's like a big tech says, oh, you can't have Parler on because that's Trump. That means that, you know, fucking apparently big tech, whatever the fuck that is, stands with the Biden presidency, stands with Democrats. Bruce Sterling, the guy I mentioned before, when that was going on, he changed his Twitter ad. It was pretty funny, to like totalitarian, like left-wing, you know, tech giant or something. I think that sort of warlordism is almost sort of like a fight for influence, where people, I don't know, it's also that stupid thing everyone was doing where it's like, oh, this brand is woke, this brand is pro-Trump, this brand is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think brands will go with that because this is good marketing. I mean, if you could say, here's the QAnon demographic and there's this many million people and you can always sell to them, I think Wendy's could just be like, yeah, you know, we're just the alt-right brand. We're the racist brand because there's, you know, 75 million of you. So who cares?
You know, like, right before you came on, we were talking about how connected to this, I feel like the American Communist Party USA brand should be revived. And I don't like their politics. I don't care about the party and all their dumb politics and shit, but like just that brand, I feel like that should vie for control in this warlord era and just be like one of those warlords. But because you have to, you know, you're gonna end up being a warlord. I have this kind of like sci-fi idea of like a post-apocalyptic warlord factions, and they have cyber trucks with machine guns on the back of them.
Yeah.
Like, you know how like ISIS has those trucks, but it's not. I don't actually think it's gonna happen, but I like to imagine this
Like on a
because
symbolic level.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like the Communist Party USA is a very powerful brand and it has a lot of kind of futuristic potential.
It's a great set of words. I'll say that
It's a great
because it
what?
has a it's a great set of like words with almost
Yeah,
like a
yeah, exactly.
paradox.
Yeah,
Because to
yeah.
say like Communist Party USA almost sounds like a paradox, and in doing that, Groys has a bit where he says the more paradoxical something is, the more artistic it is. Like that's the basic rule of modern art.
Hmm.
Communist Party USA has a beautiful modern art style name. Definitely has to be stolen.
And I feel like people kind of have a wrong idea of what parties are today because a party is kind of a corporation and a brand today, right? A
Yeah,
party isn't something. Every time people try to create parties from scratch, they just create cults or nests of drama because Americans we're individualistic and we don't know how to make a transition from individuals to groups. So
yes.
We'll be
they,
right back.
oh, I see. Okay. And then
I'll be right back.
yeah, okay, sure. Sorry. And then so we have to contend with corporations and groups that already exist because when we try to create them from scratch, we have like this kind of Puritan Protestant factional war or whatever and drama. Because that's why I like the Communist Party USA. It's just because it's not from scratch and it's such an old party and brand, and I kind of feel like I could see that acquiring significance, vying against the Democrat Party brand and the Republican brand and all these other kinds of brands. So
Maybe you know what? How do you? Maybe it's time to do an entryism. Maybe it's time to start a chapter, and then just brand better than the party itself. I mean, it is sort of the key to entryism in the modern times. It seems like people start to associate you with it until the it ejects you,
yeah,
and then you publicly say like, "I am no longer Communist Party USA. I am now Communist Party USA ML." You know, you do that type of thing.
I feel like you can seize control of the brand if your aesthetic vision is more powerful. And
Yeah.
for me, communism, the word, the capital C, means something so much different than the democratic socialism and also anarchism and kind of like American leftism. I feel like communism reminds me of Fan Wenan's drawings, that Chinese artist I was telling you about. It reminds me of just this kind of vastness and bigness.
Yes.
It's hard to explain, but
I
there's
think that's why.
it's almost too American, and almost the reason why we never had American communism or socialism is because it was competing with Americanism. Americanism was already
Yeah.
kind of,
It was
socialist.
entwined with it because if you read like
Yeah.
the book We by Evgeny Zamatin is where we get 1984 and Brave New World is the original. It's the papa of those books, and it was written by a old Bolshevik who I think Stalin told him to go live in France. I think that was his punishment, which kind of cool. That's pretty good. Could have got a bull in the neck once these guys sent to France. I think it was his wife even. But he was a great writer, so maybe that's why he got leniency. But that book We is about this world where they worship like Taylor and Ford, and they say stuff like, instead like by God, they say like by Ford, what are we going to do today? That type of shit. It's this vision where it's supposed to become. It's We.
Oh, okay.
We is the book that Brave New World in like 1984 took from, where like Huxley admitted it, where Huxley was like, yeah, I took from We. That's the book.
Okay.
And I said Orwell was like, no, I've never even heard of it. Shut up.
At least Huxley's honest.
Yeah. But We is like the old Russian book where that comes from. But it's about where like communism and Americanism triumphed, and the world is now just like glass domes where people live in like beautiful, like factory, like compounds, and are building a giant spaceship. And the Pet Shop Boys made a great concept set of songs about that book, which I highly recommend.
Something I like to say often is that the word socialism with Chinese characters is kind of weird because people ask, well, what was socialism like before? What is it besides the Chinese characteristics? And I like to respond and be like, it's Americanism. The thing they were breaking with was Americanism because central planning and standardized top-down kind of I don't know what to call it, uniform big industry was all inspired and came from America.
Yeah. Like that shows up in like there's a book called, I always get fucking mocked for the title, but they can go fuck themselves. Imagine No Possessions. Yes, it's a Beatles lyric. What of it? It's a great book. It's about Soviet constructivism. by Christina Kyer. I want to say, you'll have to Google how to spell her last name. I don't remember. But she has great quotations from like Rodchenko and all these like great artists and designers of the early Soviet era, and how they dealt with the NEP. But one of their like slogans was like, Soviet Union must reach for Americanism. Soviet Union must accomplish Americanism before America has finished Americanism. You know, these ideas of like, yes, America has unleashed these incredible productive forces through Ford, but they are not real socialists, so they can only get a little fraction of what it could be. As Marxists, we understand what it is, and so we can finish it, we can perfect it, and we can make it fairer, while still reaping the benefits of like production lines and efficient factories and all these things. And this vision, there's like really strange, like pseudo-sexual and racial visions running through Rodchenko's writing, where he says like we have to like pry apart. He's like the stiff buttocks of like capitalist society to free the like, I think he says like black slaves of like, industry. So it's like this bizarre racial and anal imagery he's using. But he's basically saying like, here's all these productive forces, we must release them. It's fucking bizarre. But there is something to all of that weird writing. And it's amazing to read, one of their big designers, I can't remember his name, I wrote stupid fucking WordPress blog post shit back in the day about them. But he wrote about like, he wrote about the idea of how to view the object and blah, 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 and object-oriented ontology, and a lot of tech bro shit sounds eerily like him, decades and decades and decades later. Because I think some of these ideas were just good, and they made sense. And so they're still floating around.
Yeah, I mean...
that's my big ramble, sorry.
No, it's all right. To me, like, the Communist Party USA is almost like the chickens coming home to roost, in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, for the whole 20th century, the real Americanism was put into practice in the Soviet Union and in China, with the big state planning, whatever. And America never... owned up to the political consequences of its own type of era or whatever, right? So to me, Communist Party USA is like, it's just now we have to face, it's like an existential facing what we really are. Like, what is the essence of what America is,
Yeah. I think there's something to that. Have you ever looked at Palladium magazine?
Oh, sorry, I don't want to keep that point. Another thing, too, is that, Moldbug, he says communism is as American as apple pie. He says all of the crimes of communism is based on Washington. What's Washington's crimes? So that's another backing up my point.
There's a lot of cults of personality that gets brought up a lot. There really are hundreds of tiny little wannabe Bobavakian types. Have you watched I don't know if you guys have watched this, or what your takes are on these people. Have you seen the Black Hammer stuff?
Dude, what the fuck? We were just talking
about that.
I was wondering if you guys did.
First of all, I don't want those people to attack me, so guys, just don't come after me. But,
yeah, you know what? I take it back. You guys, Black Hammer, you guys.
Because that's when we talk about the Austin Red Guards and shit. It's like, okay, guys, these guys are a little bit hardcore. But
I've met like handfuls of like those people. IRL, Jesus Christ,
dude. Okay, I'll be a little bit neutral. Here's what I'll say. So the Joker video of Black Hammer, was hilarious to me.
It's hysterical.
That was the first thing. The second thing is it was definitely very new, and there was this contrast between people like militant stances in the back and the guy, the main guy. I don't know what his name is.
It's kind of just like it's Ghazi Kojo.
Yeah, Ghazi with the Joker makeup, dancing stuff, and then I realized it's a really brilliant work of art because it represents the nature of all of these organizations in America.
Yeah,
they tend to have this formal posture, this strict, serious posture, but in reality, there's this clownish underbelly.
Yeah,
and
theater kid.
When I was yesterday. I had my like insane schizo stream yesterday, and I was ranting and I was just like, if you are calling yourself a Marxist-Leninist in the West, you're a clown, and I'm a clown too. That's okay, but I want to be more like the Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. There's different types of clowns, But I was just like, I was like, why so serious? Why are you guys so dogmatic and so serious and so,
talking in
close-minded?
hyphens.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said talking with hyphens between every fucking word.
Yeah.
It's like revisionist, imperialist,
Why,
blah blah blah.
why do you guys are so taking it so, like, loosen up a little bit and have a more of an open mind, because you got to be aware of the fact that in actual reality you're not doing anything. You don't really amount to anything.
That's why I always love Red Kahina. Even if I don't agree with her 100%, I agree with her maybe 70%, maybe 85%. But she's so fucking weird and so very much her own strange person. I'm like, that's a good Marxist-Leninist in a way. Because yes, she's rigorous. Yes, she has all these thoughts. Yes, she has her opinions of varying degrees of quality. But it's not super, super deadly. I must pretend to be in the 1920s or 30s, and it's the Third International, and Stalin's going to read, my memos. We're not in that era. We're just fucking Twitter users.
Here's the issue.
We are people buying books on Amazon. We are not, party functionaries of some pure era. We're dorks. Even if this comes to something, we're dorks. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Here's what these people can't wrap their head around. There is no central authority, and there probably there never will be anymore. I don't think there will be. That's why I talked about that's why I talked to you about the fantasy thing, the sci-fi thing, about the warlordism and shit. Because like, we're not in this era where people, even anarchists, everyone wants to have this idea that there is a common instantiated discourse and site of common meaning that's just already out there. Rather
they
than
want
the
a
fact
canon.
That we're all warlords who are creating different ones,
We're atomized liberal subjects. We are pod people eating bugs. There's an article that Ed Berger, who I'm going to bully to coming on this stream.
I already bothered him. I bothered him again.
I talk to him pretty regularly, so I'm going to bug him. But I'm going to do it.
If he doesn't want to come on, that's also completely fine.
Yeah. But I think he would have a good time. But
we would love to have him on, though. We really.
He's so fucking smart. I'd love to hear him ramble. But he sent me an article ages ago about, I think his name's like Lardreau, someone whose shit is not in English. I don't read French, so I'm fucked. But there's a brilliant article which I have saved. I will post to the chat for those who might be interested. Mm-hmm. It's about the bizarre mental gymnastics of an extremely intelligent ML who you could also call liberal or a fascist or an anarchist or about 20 other things, because it keeps being like, what does this ideology mean if there's no central authority? What do you do if there's no party anymore? And he's old. He saw it all collapse. But the article on him ends with his interview. They're asking, what is your ultimate idea? Where do you go with this? And finally he says, it's the height of idiocy, he said, to deny the importance of authority. He's like, and I continue to say, long live Mao, long live Stalin. He's like, may they be held by the Virgin Mary for 10,000 years or whatever.
That blog post of yours,
that
has that title.
I was kind of obsessed with that guy.
I love that post so fucking much, and I really love the ending of it with the stars thing, and that's just so beautiful, man. I love that so much.
I'm going to get back to writing this bullshit, because I'm like, why not? Why not be cringe? Why not share some opinions?
But that thing about the stars stuck with me. I actually was driving sometime, a few months ago, and I was remembering, and I was like, dude, that was really heavy. One day we will become stars or whatever.
Yeah, the Japanese Red Army guy said that. Yeah. That really got to me, too. I was like, Jesus Christ, what an image of eternity. But the Lardreau has something similar with this. Where he said, dare to give yourself a master. He's like, that is the point of philosophy. To give yourself a master, to be able to not be so vain and to be so arrogant to say that there are not people smarter and better than you. But I think he's also smart because he picked dead people as his masters in an era, and then he continued on into the modern era. He lived past, I think, the 90s, to see it all come down. But he's still like, no, I'm staying because they were already dead. So the Union's gone, of course, but I was already a Stalinist. I was already a Maoist. I was already these things, and they were long dead.
That's why I'm talking about warlordism and socialistic nomadicism, because to me, I think we live in an era where we still do have a masters, maybe not people as masters, but masters, but we have to be responsible for our masters. We can't just pretend it just exists out there. We actually have to, we have to own up to the fact that we are generating our own masters, basically.
Yeah, it's like a religious person. Religious people live where the central figures of the religion have been dead for thousands of years, but they still live with all this commitment in their hearts and all this commitment in their lives, because it's there, it's written down. They don't need to be alive. You don't need these living idols. You can study and work and argue, and like Stalin, where he's raging against the Talmudists of Marxism, as he said, because they were like Talmudists arguing over the text, arguing and fighting. It's all still important. It's all still alive. The text is, the text matters. A fucking German person who I love so much, where she said, like, I had this professor who hated Derrida, he hated postmodernism, and he went on stage with a copy of like a collected works of Shakespeare and screamed, "The text is the text. The text is here in front of you," like instead of "That's the author," or whatever. And then he had a heart attack on stage. And had to be carried away. But in some ways, I think with Marx, we can still do this. We can still say the text is here, the reading is here, the work is here. But the person isn't. There is no party to persecute us. There is no censor. There's only our own work and our own labor that we can do on our own terms, for better or for worse. Probably worse, but we live in the worst world. So
yeah, I agree with that. But I would just add the caveat that the text also requires the mediation of an aesthetic. And that's so important, because if you don't have that, you do have this kind of Talmudistic dogmatism where people think they know the essence of what the text is, but in fact, if you really want to draw out the essence of the text, you need to have an aesthetic. You need to draw it out and through work and give it form. And
it's like Hegel.
Yeah, you need to update it to the contemporary times by drawing out and distilling the essence of the text and giving form to it. In accordance with the, because that you can really form cults around people who profess to tell you that this is the true meaning of Marxism. So you know what I mean. So you do have to have the kind of aesthetic as well. But
I agree. I think that's why I was like trying to look at Strauss, even though it's vile, but I'm still curious in these people who sort of recreated Sorelianism for for non-leftists. Like, this is intriguing. Or Kojak talks about it, or Hegel, where he says like myth is like philosophy expressed through aesthetics, something to that effect. There's truth to that. And there's a truth to that we operate on myths, especially if we are apparently, re-primitivized in some way, de-culturized, de-educated. We do need aesthetics and we do need myths. And I think our current political landscape seems to show that myths and aesthetics and like the irrational is incredibly powerful, incredibly alive.
I almost don't like calling it myth, because to me, I feel like the baseline of some kind of true reality is itself being put in motion and put to work in this kind of aesthetic partiality, this kind of like sight of creating beauty. To me, I feel like this is all there is, not just aesthetics and myths but I feel like it's almost kind of like the Deleuzian stuff about the virtual and the actual, and that, like, I feel like the aesthetics is where our actual reality. That's what kind of Zizek's point is, where our real reality is actually indeterminate, but also in the process of its actualization. But the fact that Marxist-Leninists in the West have failed so abysmally to establish themselves, at least as some type of special interest current, some type of identifiable movement, that's really the issue we're dealing with here. There is no communist movement, and never has been, almost never has. Maybe in the 30s or something, you can argue. But following World War II, you're not really dealing with a popular movement. Okay? You can sustain a popular movement without actually acquiring power. My issue is the issue that there hasn't even been a popular movement in the West. Do you have a new prescription for workers' power, or just trying to refresh the discourse? I just want people to rethink what they mean by all these words. I want people to go back to Marx's original dealings with Hegel and think about, why did Marx break from Hegel and give the proletariat the significance he did. A movement is popular when the barrier to entry does not require education. I think it's a really good definition. When the barrier to entry doesn't require education, which means someone could just look at that movement and be like, I'm with it. I'm with them. I identify with them. That's what Hugo Chavez could do, right? In Venezuela. That's what Bernie could do at one point. The barrier to entry doesn't require any type of theory whatsoever. That's a really important qualifier for what makes a movement popular, in my view. Barrier to entry. That's the one. Like the brand. I'm saying the brand and the aesthetics and the tradition of the part and the name recognition, brand recognition. Stop complaining.
We're looking at it in a future-oriented way. You know, we're kind of talking about what it could be, not what it is right now, but what it could be.
Yeah, we don't care about what little trends permeate there. This guy should come back when he organizes a party. Okay, here's a common trope that you are going to encounter, you the chat. I'm going to explain this to you. When you're a leftist and you're dealing with anything in America or Britain, and I can't speak for the rest of the European countries, these countries' main ethical and aesthetic foundation is Protestantism. And according to the Protestant aesthetic, pain equals virtue, right? Suffering is some kind of virtue. There's something virtuous and good about suffering. When this guy's telling me to go organize a party, what he's really saying is, you go give me a pound of flesh. You know, you go suffer somehow for no reason, even though I won't get anywhere, and I'll respect you more because you just experienced more pain and suffering, even though I didn't get anywhere. And leftists, you're going to find brag all the time and boast about how much organizing they do and how much party stuff they get into. Even though they know it doesn't get them anywhere, somehow they get clout from that fact because of how much they suffer. Just because of how much they suffer. I think that's a very uniquely Western and maybe Anglo thing. But that's something you're going to encounter. I have yet to see why I should organize a party. I'm not even so sure that it's our job to organize a party. I think parties in this day and age are more like corporations. And I don't think you can create them from scratch. I think America already does have a communist party, the CPUSA. And the question I've been trying to interrogate and ask is, can Americans do something with the CPUSA? I know it has shitty politics, but the organizational infrastructure that's in place in the tradition and history, I'm very skeptical of this idea of creating parties from scratch. I don't think parties are the most advanced form of I don't even know if organization is the good word. Organization in this digital age. My views on this are very nuanced. We actually wrote something. If you go on our Twitter, go read what we wrote for this Russian website, Prometej, and I discuss specifically the party question very briefly. But our view, I think your view about, the party, you're taking a lot for granted. Until his meme ideology, I don't know why you're saying we have a meme ideology. All we've said is we're Marxist-Leninists, and we've also said things that Marxist-Leninists in the West just don't understand and aren't familiar with. I don't see how this makes us having a meme ideology. This idea, guys, that you're trying to define us is the problem. You're trying to define us based on the thinkers we learn from and draw from. But I can literally name you a million thinkers that we learn and draw from, and you're trying to define this as some kind of finite series of what is the discrete origin of... All we've defined ourselves discretely as is Marxist-Leninists. Do we learn from and read everyone? Yes, we do. Everyone who has anything interesting to say whatsoever, we're going to give them attention. Does that mean those people define us and that we're Duginist, Landian, Zizekian? You don't have to add all we're just Marxist-Leninists who can actually distinguish this subjective theory stuff from Marxism-Leninism as an index of objective historical achievements. So that's why we're very simply Marxist-Leninists.